You're watching Al Jazeera. A reminder of our top stories. A defiant Benazir Bhutto has vowed to continue fighting to bring democracy to Pakistan. Speaking at a press conference just hours after an assassination attempt on her life, the former Pakistani Prime Minister called the attackers cowards and said she wasn't prepared to surrender to militants.
To save Pakistan and to save democracy, because we believe democracy alone can save Pakistan from disintegration and a militant takeover, then we are prepared to risk our lives and we are prepared to risk our liberty. But we are not prepared to surrender our great nation to the militants.
Well, let's stay with that story. With me now in the studio is Maria Kusisto, Pakistan expert from the Eurasia Group, and from New York we're joined by Parag Khanna, a South Asia expert from the New America Foundation. Thanks for being with us, both of you. Maria, if I can start with you, how big a setback is this for Benazir Bhutto and the PPP, bearing in mind that her big strength is holding these mass rallies and getting popular support? She's not going to be able to do that now, is she?
Well, I would actually argue that probably these attacks are going to create some sympathy towards her. We've seen this kind of events elsewhere in South Asia, and I think what she's now trying to do is boost the morale and the unity of her party. And I think the party will continue to hold mass rallies and fight the elections. So I don't necessarily think that this will be a long-term setback to Benazir Bhutto and the party.
Parag Khanna, she's going to inspire sympathy, there's no doubt about that, but will some supporters be frightened to actually support her now?
No, I don't believe so. If you look at her own personal history as well as that of the party, street power has been essential to their credibility and their strength, particularly in a time of authoritarian rule. And I don't think that people will be afraid, especially since she has come out so aggressively and defiantly in declaring their continued willingness to demonstrate and to fight for democracy.
Parag, what about this deal that hasn't been set in stone yet with General Musharraf? How has this been affected? Is it going to be more likely this deal will go ahead or less likely, do you think?
That's a really good question. It's hard to say. Obviously, the assassination attempt delayed the meeting that was scheduled between the two of them, Bhutto and Musharraf, but of course that will still happen. Of course, all eyes would nonetheless have been on the two of them to see what kind of deal it is, and I don't believe that this attempt, precisely because we don't know who is responsible for it, is necessarily going to derail that process. After all, the deal between them still is the ticket that Benazir needs to have the instant legitimacy that she needs in the political process. So I think that some form of deal will continue.
Maria, is the deal in danger, do you think?
Well, I think it's, I don't think we should focus too much on any kind of written deal. I think we are seeing significant levels of cooperation between Benazir Bhutto and Musharraf. And what now Benazir Bhutto has to face is a decision whether she's going to take a hardline approach towards Musharraf and demand more robust measures against extremism, and for him to, deliver those confidence-building measures that she's been demanding, or whether she will in fact join hands with Musharraf and start finding joint measures how to actually combat extremism in Pakistan.
So it's a question of how far she feels she can push him, do you think?
I think so, yes.
Parag, she's asking all political parties, she did that today in that emotional press conference, she's asking all political parties to come out and pull together for democracy. But was that just political campaigning, just words, heat of the moment? How unrealistic is that, do you think?
Well, as a campaign tactic, it's very intelligent because she wants to be the one to portray herself as being the big tent, so to speak, to bring all the parties together and unite democratic forces, whether it's against extremism or authoritarianism, which is something that obviously Musharraf has failed to do. So as a political tactic, it's a very smart move. She tried to do that for the last several years during exile while she was running this Alliance for the Restoration of Democracy together with Nawaz Sharif and various others. So it will continue to be part of her strategy, and whether or not it succeeds remains to be seen. She obviously is weary of other parties defecting from her sort of grand coalition, which might happen if she gets too close to Musharraf or is portrayed as being too close to Musharraf.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it, Maria, that doing a deal with a military man is going to put some people off. How much has her influence waned, do you think, in the 8 years she's been in exile? It's a very different Pakistan she's come back to.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the recent opinion polls are suggesting that the situation is very fluid, and what we've seen is that Nawaz Sharif has actually also boosted his popularity over the past few weeks and past few months. And I think there will be tough competition between those two leaders. However, I would say that Musharraf's popularity has been declining. Musharraf had a popularity of about 60% about a year back, and now his popularity is probably somewhere around 20%. So he's going to be a very, very weak partner potentially for Benazir Bhutto. So a lot of political bargaining there, I think.
Parag, in some way, the international backing for this so-called deal between Benazir Bhutto and General Musharraf has led to the violence. That's what some analysts are saying, has led to the violence that we saw on Thursday. We saw international condemnation also on Thursday, but how do you think international powers like the UN, like Washington, are going to continue to try to shore up Musharraf?
I'm not so sure that they're going to try to shore him up. They've been encouraging him to pursue this deal. I think that on the one hand, their support for him is relatively reliable in the sense that they appreciate that whatever contours the deal has, he will remain the person on top. So I don't think that they're going to try to shape the deal so much rather than let it be shaped by the key parties and see how it turns out. Remember, this is going to be a gradual process that goes in multiple phases. There's the issue still of the viability of Musharraf's candidacy, and that will have an impact on the situation that outside powers really can't intervene in. Then there's the issue of Nawaz Sharif coming back. Then there's the issue of holding the elections in a couple of months. All of these things will actually shape the final outcome much more than outsiders tend to believe they have influence over.
I'd like finally to ask both of you, we always tend to use a rather overused cliche of turning point for Pakistan, but do you believe this really is the time for that phrase to be used? Maria first.
I think probably the turning point actually came in March 2007 when we saw really a mass movement, mass pro-democracy movement emerging in Pakistan. And I think since then there has been increasing amount of pressure towards Musharraf to compromise and negotiate with political parties, and particularly secular political parties. And I think that is more likely to have been the key turning point.
Parag, sum up for us how you feel the situation in Pakistan is now moving.
Well, it's almost like clockwork. Every 10 years or so, there is a major political crisis in the country that shapes the next sort of phase in the country's evolution, and you can more or less set your watch to it, and this is just another one of those. It will be stumbling through, basically. This is not going to be a grand turning point towards stable democracy, which the country has never had. This can only set the stage for the next 5 years, and it's really impossible to predict beyond 5 years what the political situation will look like. So I think that whatever kind of deal we see struck now between the two of them and some kind of military-civilian alliance is going to remain very much the case. Who is stronger or weaker will depend on any given moment, but that's likely to be the leadership structure for at least the next 5 years.
Okay, Parag Khanna there in New York for us, and Maria Kusisto in the studio with me here in London. Many thanks to both of you.